Hey everybody, I hope you had a great weekend and you enjoyed our first day of this new unit. Today's video is going to be probably maybe a little bit shorter than that last one. We're going to look at today how we can use the distributive property to help us solve equations a little bit more efficiently, make it a little bit easier on ourselves. So two main topics that we're going to talk about today. First thing we're going to talk about is proportion. Okay, a proportion is whenever you have two ratios set equal to each other. And just a little friendly reminder that as you're watching these videos, remember you're supposed to be taking notes on everything that's on the screen and then completing all problems. And then next class, we'll come around and we'll check this in as part of your homework grade. Okay, so now back to math. Now we know what proportion is. So you may have learned how to solve a proportion in previous years. So I want you to try to think back. The most common way that a lot of people learn how to solve a proportion is by cross multiplication. Okay, and what happens when you do cross multiplying? You take the numerator of one fraction and multiply it with the denominator of the other, and then take the numerator of the other one and multiply it by the denominator of the other. Okay, so what we would get when we do that is 7 times 5, which is 35, equals 10 times the quantity of b plus 5. Now, I really want to encourage you, when you're using this cross multiplication, that you actually show this step like I did as 10 times the quantity of b plus 5. The reasoning why is when students sometimes multiply the 10 with the quantity of b plus 5, they remember to multiply with the b, but they forget the plus 5. And so what they end up with is 10b plus 5, which isn't right. Because when we distribute here, we see we get 35 equals 10 plus 50. So something very different. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, then using what we talked about last class, you'd want to get the b alone. So you're going to subtract 50 from each side. And then you'll have negative 15 equals 10b. You still want to get that 10b alone, so you're going to undo your multiplying by dividing. And then also, as we've talked about, if you can reduce a fraction, you should. So negative 15 halves, what can you divide each of those by? 5 is correct. Okay, good. So we would have negative 3 halves as our answer. And we talked about before how we could check that, right? Think back, how could you check it? Plug it in and see if it makes the equation true. Okay, good. Now, before you practice this, I want you to really understand why this whole cross multiplying deal works. So let's go back to our original problem. Okay, and the cross multiplying is definitely going to be a more efficient route. But again, it's important to know why something works, because if you understand why it works, you have a better chance of being more successful at it. So let's say I didn't cross multiply. Let's just say I did this one step at a time. Well, the first thing I would know is I can't have this b in the denominator. I need to move it to the numerator. So I need to cancel it out of the denominator. Okay, the way I could cancel all the denominator is multiply this fraction by b plus 5 over 1. Whatever you do the one side, yep, gotta do the other. So we have b plus 5 over 1 on the other side. Now, what happens on the left-hand side here? Well, the b plus 5 and the b plus 5, those reduce out, and you're now left with 7 equals 10 times the quantity of b plus 5 over 5. Now, some people might say, hey, I'm going to do 10 divided by 5, which you could. But again, I'm trying to prove to you why this cross multiplication works. So let's say I want to get that 5 out of the denominator. What can I multiply each side by? 5. Okay, so if I multiply each side of my fraction by 5, what I'm hoping you see is we now have 35 equals 10 times the quantity of b plus 5. Hopefully that looks familiar. It should. It matches what we got when we cross multiplied. Okay, now what's the difference? Here, it took us 2 steps. Here was 1 step. Okay, so I totally approve using cross multiplication. It's a very effective, efficient method of solving the problems. It's just important to understand where it's coming from. Okay, so now what I want you to do is go ahead and pause the video, and I'd like you to go ahead and solve these 2 equations using cross multiplication or the other method, and then restart the video just to check your work. All right, have fun. Okay, so now that you're back with me real quick, let me walk you through this. We're going to cross multiply. 3 times 8 gives me 24. 4 times x gives me 4x. I want to get my x alone, so I divide each side by 4. And you should have done 6 equals x. And just a quick little review of that check process we talked about before. Remember, we can just plug it in. We have 4/3 equals 8 over 6. Well, if you think about it, you can divide 8 and 6 each by 2. And if you divide them each by 2, you get 4/3 equals 4/3. Good to go. Okay, let's do this other one real quick. So we would cross multiply and get 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times the quantity of m minus 8. So then we're going to, you could distribute, or actually, now come to think of it, I'm going to use that method I talked about in the last video. I'm going to just get rid of that 8 outside. So I'm going to choose to divide each side by 8. You could have distributed and get 1 equals 8 divided by 8 is 1. So we have 1 equals m minus 8. We all know we want to add 8 to each side. And so we end up with 9 equals m. Nice work. Okay, so that's the first installment today. You've seen how we can use the distributive property and cross multiplication to solve proportions. Okay, second thing I want to talk about is solving equations with fractions. Now, when a lot of people see problems like this, they like to get a common denominator, which you can do. The strategy that I think is most efficient is to clear the fractions. Okay, because I don't know about you, that first T looks a little bit like an F. Sorry, guys. Okay, I don't know about you, but I don't really love working with fractions. So if I can just get rid of them, then I don't even have to worry about it. So let's think about, if I want to get rid of this fraction, what would I need to multiply that first fraction by to get rid of my denominator, to get rid of the fraction? Okay, hopefully you're thinking 3, because if you multiply this by 3 over 1, these 3's will cancel out. Now the thing is, you can't just multiply this fraction by the 3. You have to do the whole side of that problem. And you guys know at this point, whatever you do to one side, you gotta do the other. Okay, so how's this gonna help us out? Well, we're gonna distribute this 3 on the left-hand side. So what we will get is 3x over 3, then 3 times 5 gives us 15. And on the other side, 2x times 3 is 6x. You're thinking, okay, Brescia, great, I solve a fraction. Well, what's 3x divided by 3? Just 1x. So we have x equals, or x plus 15 equals 6x. Well, this is nice, because now we don't have a fraction anymore. Now, this step right here, I know you could have done in your brain, right? You could have reduced that 3x over 3 and skipped straight on down to here. And if you did that, totally fine. That might be kind of the goal for us, but I just included this part in the box so that you could see why it is that your fraction's getting eliminated. Okay, so let's finish solving this equation. You guys know how to do this. We subtract x from each side. we get 15 equals 5x. Hopefully you're still taking your notes. Okay, then you divide each side, you divide and you get 3 equals x. Okay, so let's try this problem. Now you have two different fractions. If you multiply the first fraction by what, you'll get rid of the denominator, a 3. What about the second one? A 6. So whenever you have two different denominators, find the LCD, and that's what you're going to multiply by. So I'm going to make a note here. Multiply by the LCD. What's your LCD between 3 and 6? 6. Okay, so I'm going to multiply each side of my equation by 6 over 1. Okay, so on this side, and again, you can reduce in your head if you want. I'm going to show the steps. You get 42x over 3 minus, distribute to the second one, 6 over 6 equals 5 times 6 or 30. Now, if we reduce those fractions, 42 divided by 3 is 14. So we have 14x. 6 divided by 6 is 1. There you go. Okay, now you're just solving this equation. Let's add the 1 to each side. So we have 14x equals 31. Let's divide each side by 14. Can you reduce 31 divided by 14? Nope. Okay. Remember, you can just leave it as improper fraction. Don't get nervous because you get some fractions. Okay, at this point, I want you to go ahead and pause the video and solve the last two equations using the method we just talked about, and then start it back up and check your work. Okay, so for this first equation, I'm going to multiply each side by 5. Do you know why I'm going to multiply by 5 over 1? Okay, if you're not sure, it's because that will cancel out that denominator. Okay, so when we distribute, we get 20x plus 15 over 5 equals, remember to distribute to both of those guys, even though it's on the right side, 5x minus 5. Why is that so nice? Well, 15 divided by 5 is 3. So we now have 20x plus 3 equals 5x minus 5. And should let me keep going. Let's see here. Then I want to keep those x's positive like we talked about last time. I'm going to subtract 5x from each side. So I now have 15x plus 3 equals negative 5. 1 second here, guys, to get us some more room to work. Okay. Then we're going to subtract the 3 from each side. So we now have 15x equals negative 8. Divide each side by 15. And x equals negative 8/15. Okay, so hopefully that's what you got. Okay, and then the last one, you look for your LCD. What's your LCD between 2 and 5? 10, good. Hopefully that's what you multiply by. So you multiply by 10 over 1 and 10 over 1. Okay, distribute. We have 30x over 2 plus we get 10 over 5 equals 60 on this side. Again, the whole reason why we did that is we can now reduce this to be 15x plus 2 equals 60. Okay, now you're just solving equations like we did last time. You subtract your 2 from each side. 15x equals 58. Divide each side by 15, and you get x equals 58 over 15. Nice work, you guys. All right, managed to survive another thrilling one of my videos. So again, you should have taken notes. You should have tried all the problems. Tonight, there's going to be a Google form for you to complete that's just going to give you an opportunity to voice whether you understand this concept and give you a chance to ask questions so I know what we want to talk about next time, as well as do a couple practice problems. All right, have a great night, guys. Bye.